for joining me. It's nice to see you. So tonight the topic is on self-worth and loneliness. So before we start, I wanted to do some pranayama, and I'm going to teach you this. It's called Bhastrika Pranayama, but it's through the Kavalyadam tradition, so it might be a little bit different than some other traditions. And it's a really nice pranayama for kind of bringing the energy upwards and awakening the brain. So it'll be good for our conversation. So first, come and sit in a comfortable sitting position. Closing the eyes. First, elongating the spine, relaxing the jaw, the shoulders, relaxing the facial muscles. Just bringing your mind to the breathing. So if you have earphones, it's a good idea to use the earphones, or mute yourself, one or the other. Just keeping the awareness on your breathing. Just noticing the natural breathing rhythm, not necessarily trying to change anything. Just noticing what is there. We're going to do this Bhastrika Pranayama, which requires knowing Kapalabhati. I'm assuming everybody knows Kapalabhati. Is there anybody? Put up your hand if you've never done Kapalabhati. It's that one. Elsa, do you know a little bit? Have you tried that before? Okay, so I'll try to explain it without going, because it's kind of a complicated pranayama, and I'm not going to explain in a lot of detail, but you'll get it. You'll get the idea, even if you miss some little bits here and there. So Bhastrika in the Kavalyadam tradition is joining this pranayama called Surya Bedam. So it's a warming pranayama with Kapalabhati. So bring one hand on the lower belly, below the navel. And first, let's exhale all the air out, starting from the bottom, so the lower belly, pushing the air up and out the lungs. Close the left nostril, inhale through the right. Exhale through the left, double the exhalation. Inhale through both nostrils. And exhale Kapalabhati. So do about 20 pumps. So it's hand on the lower belly, forcing the exhale out the nose. The last one, you force out. And then close the left nostril, inhale through the right. Close the right, exhale through the left. Double the exhalation. Inhale through both nostrils. And Kapalabhati. Do 20 pumps. Last one, force it. Inhale through the right. Exhale through the left. Inhale through both nostrils. And Kapalabhati 20 times. Last one, force it. Inhale through the right. Exhale, double through the left. Inhale through both. And Kapalabhati. Last one, force it out. And then continue, do 5 more at your own breathing rhythm. If you finished, you just come back to a Ujjayi sound, breathing through both nostrils. Continuing to make the exhale double the length of the inhale. And take the hands together. And rub the hands together, warming up the hands. Placing them over the eyes. Opening the eyes behind the palms. And releasing the hands. So, the topic. Self-worth and loneliness. So, the reason why I decided to talk about this is because as we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're on lockdown, we're all closed off from each other and we're having to teach like this. It's a little bit strange, but we, human beings are very adaptable. This is why we rule the earth, right? So we can handle anything. So I think because loneliness, I think you could also call this a pandemic. And not just now, I think even before we went on lockdown, if you check some reports, there's varying reports on how often people feel lonely or how many people feel lonely. And at some point or another, the majority of us experience that feeling of loneliness. So you could say that in its own way is a pandemic. And when we say loneliness, it doesn't mean that you're actually isolated from others the way we are now. So this is one thing that's been on my mind a little bit is people who have been feeling lonely or depressed or any kind of these kind of feelings before we were on lockdown. How are they feeling now when they're closed off? If you are choosing to, go on a silent meditation retreat, then it's really, you prepare yourself before you go and you're really kind of psyching yourself up for it. But in this case, we've all been forced into this oh, wait, there's a couple people coming in. We've all been forced into this self-retreat. Welcome for the ones that showed up a little late. No problem. Okay, so we're talking about loneliness. And so it's not only being isolated physically from others. So why do we feel lonely? We can feel lonely because we feel misunderstood. So you could be having a great social life and see a lot of people, have a big family, and still have this sense of feeling misunderstood, which can give you a sense of loneliness. You could also feel like the real you is not accepted. As I have two teenagers, so this is always a topic. And if we think back when we were teenagers, remembering like if you didn't fit in the right crowd, then you feel like you're kind of isolated from the crowd and you have to act in one way to be liked by the others. And the kids notice that very often, whether it's themselves or their friends, that you can see that people are kind of playing this role when that isn't really how they feel. But we act in ways, and I remember doing this not even as a teenager, but even 2 months ago. No, I don't know. But it's not just for young people. We all find ourselves in situations where we're behaving in a way, and somewhere in the back of our mind we're like, but that's not really me, but I need to somehow fit in with the crowd, so I'm behaving in this way, even though it doesn't feel like it's the authentic me. So that can trigger some feeling of loneliness. And then also, do I belong? Has anybody ever felt this or asked themselves, do I belong here? Like, Do I belong in this yoga community? And I think it can happen a lot in a yoga community. We think that the yoga community is all welcome arms, everybody join us and we'll love you all, we're all one. But it's not true. It's part of the human community like any other community. You know, if you're, I've heard people tell me that they feel guilty, or you can tell if they haven't become vegetarian, they tell you, and there's this kind of shameful feeling that they're not able to be vegetarian or able to be vegan, or oh my god, I ate a Mars bar, or whatever it is. You can have that feeling of shame because our community, this is something that you're just not supposed to do. Or drink a beer. And I'm guilty of it too. When I hear somebody that had a beer, I'm like, really? You drank a beer? And then I have to check in with myself. Well, hey, just because I don't do that doesn't mean there's anything necessarily wrong with it, or that they are not still part of my community, right? We can't be perfect, so we kind of have to pick and choose the areas of yoga that we're going to work on at that time, in that period of our life. So it happens everywhere, whether it's yoga community, at a job, at a school, I don't know, nightclubs, wherever. I don't know where people go, but and so at the core of these questions, I think there's a lack of self-worth. Because if you truly have this really authentic feeling of I belong, I know I exist and I deserve to exist and I am important, you're not gonna struggle with this. And then truly, if you really belong in your heart, you know where home is, and so your home is inside. So you don't have to feel like, if I'm not getting approval from the outside, you're not going to feel lonely, because it's all in here. So, but self-worth, self-love, this is another pandemic. And this, I think, is even a stronger pandemic than loneliness. I don't know if I've ever met anybody who really has a solid sense of their self-worth. No, I don't know. Like, you can it might look like they do, because they look so strong and confident and they can achieve everything, but it's just outer appearances. Inside, then you might feel very weak. And I can tell you a story when the reason why I left the fashion business, there's layers there, but one of the reasons why I left the fashion business is because when I was a young girl, like from about 12, at 12, I remember thinking, I will never ever be like my parents. And this was like a strong feeling in me. It was like fire, and from then on, that's all I worked towards. And I was going to be a success. I was going to be known. I was going to be important. I'm going to be able to, whatever. I'm going to be important, basically. So I entered the fashion world, and I worked very hard in that business to achieve. And I did pretty good, I ended up with a really good job at the end, and my last job was amazing, and I was so-called important in the company, and all this kind of stuff, everything I wanted, the salary, the clothes, everything I had, but inside, I was still the same. And this was a kind of a shocker to me, because somehow I thought if I had all that external stuff, then inside I would be worth something, right? But inside I still felt like I wasn't worth enough, because that has to come from inside. It's not going to come from the people the clothes you wear, the company you work for, or how much money is in your bank account, or any of those kinds of things. So Yeah, so, and from the outside, because people used to say to me, oh, Linda, you always look so happy. Oh, Linda this, oh, Linda that. And I was always looking at them like, they don't even see me, they don't even notice. They have no idea. It's like I play the game so well. Nobody has any idea about how I really am inside, because inside I wasn't well, and still I'm not well, like, I'm better and I make my way through the world, but I can't say I'm certainly not fully equanimous. I have my ups and downs like every other person does. And this will make more sense as I talk about it, because that will never change, actually, on some level. So this is, I think those are also pandemics. People, you're not necessarily seeing people die from them, but people die from this as well, from different, we don't have to go there, but people will die from lack of self-love, self-worth, and loneliness. So how do we calculate our self-worth? If you think about it, how do I, if I have to write down what makes me worthy, how do we calculate this? So I think that we calculate it on how worthy we felt as a child. This is a huge thing that is going to affect us for our entire lives, and is very, very scary when you're a mother. It's like, you're trying so hard to not do it wrong. But you're gonna make some mistakes. So why, coming back to my story, why did I learn to not be worthy? So when I was young, my parents had me before they were planning to be married, or probably before they even decided they were ever gonna, be together again. I was an accident, basically. And I grew up as this accident baby, and really felt like my parents didn't care about me, they didn't love me. And I'm not saying that that's true, but the way they expressed it, now that I'm grown up and I've done a lot of self-work, I know that they did love me, but they just couldn't express it in the way that I was looking for. And so this caused a lot of pain in me from my youngest years. And so when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and this is when, if you have had struggled a lot as a child, usually in your teens is when you start having the meltdowns, right? The meltdowns, the breakdowns, all the suicidal thoughts. Nowadays people do self-harm, and I don't know if that was happening when I was young, but I didn't hear, it wasn't talked about. When I was young, it was not talked about. And so when you have those ideas in your head as a young person, back then, you're even more isolated, because there's nobody you can talk to, and you wouldn't dare mention this to anybody. At least that was my case. And so how did I learn to be worthy? Well, I was quite good at school. I was good at drawing and creative and making things. And so I learned to be good with my achievements. So I would get praise for my achievements, praise from my parents. That's when they would show that they actually noticed me, and praise from teachers and other people, like other kids at school. So this taught me as a child that that was what made me worthy. And so I'm assuming that there's a lot of other people, because I don't think I'm super that unique, I think there's a lot of other people that have the same experiences. And I think also because we don't always know how to express our love to somebody. And as a mother, I can understand a lot more, because as a mother, you've got this underlying feeling of fear for your children. You want them to be safe, you want them to be happy, you want them to get all the things that will give them happiness, which would be fitting in right? Not having problems with other kids, having friends. It would be doing good at school, having skills, being successful, all these kind of superficial things. And so I think we perpetuate it because we also, as parents, we want to give that to our kids, especially when we lacked it ourselves. Right? If we lacked anything, then we're going to even be stronger. And we misunderstand that all the kid wants is a hug and love, and mommy loves me. And at the end of the day, they do good at school, they don't do it good at school, they're loved. They have friends, they don't have friends, they're loved. They're pretty, they're not pretty, they have pimples all over their face, they get, whatever, all the problems that come in childhood, they know that somewhere, despite anything, there's somebody who will love them no matter what. And then from there, then they can really flower into whoever they're meant to be, whether it's an artist, whether it's being good at school or not being good at school. In the reality is nobody ever asks me my grade school grades. Like, okay, I'm not saying there's not a trail, because when you build skills, they build upon one another. So if you learn to concentrate at school, you learn to concentrate in higher education, you learn to concentrate in your job. And so I'm not going to say that school isn't good. It's good, but not at the expense of killing the self-worth or self-love of somebody. So I think, so going back, I think that it's very common for all of us to calculate our self-worth based on our achievements. How have I achieved in my career? How have I achieved financially? How have I achieved materially? How have I achieved in family? Like, have you been brought up that a successful person gets married at this age and has kids at that age and has a house of their own? And if you've been brought up like that, then you're going to have a little bit of that as your self-worth. Well, Mom, I'm still single and I'm 36 years old. I had my first baby at 37, and I remember when I told my mom, her response was, "Oh, I didn't think you were ever gonna have kids." And I was just like, what? Because in my head, I thought it wasn't out of the question, but it wasn't, it wasn't in, it wasn't out. It was just like, let's see what happens, right? So she was kind of surprised. And then, what is success? What is success really? If you think about it, I think success is really being able to go home inside and feeling okay where you are and feeling authentic with who you are. And it's taken me years. I'm talking about this. I don't want you to presume that I've achieved any of it. It's just stuff that I've reflected on. And really, true success is something much deeper than, oh, you were successful in this career or that career. I have a successful yoga school for the moment. Let's see. Depending at the end of the pandemic what happens, but at the moment it's kind of successful. So our ideas of success aren't even our own, if we think about it. We have been programmed, not like a robotic program, and it's not like, I don't want to make a drama like this, but we see television shows, we're told from our teachers, from society, who we respect, who gets noticed, who gets noticed, who has the most money, who gets the most awards, all these kinds of things. These tell us what success is, subtly, right? But this doesn't mean it is yogic success. Once you study the yoga scriptures, you start to understand that, really, seriously. You get a nice house, but does it mean you're happy inside? Does it mean you're at peace? Or does it mean you still scream at every little thing that happens to you? Can you handle the ups and downs and change of the prakriti, the world around us? So in some ways, society has decided for us what success is. And another little funny story, when I first started yoga, so I'd maybe been doing Ashtanga, I don't know, maybe like a month or something. I was really new in Ashtanga yoga. I'd been doing a little bit of Hatha yoga, but when I started Ashtanga, that's when I really got, on the path of yoga. And I did this workshop with this teacher called Danny Paradise, and it was in Toronto, and one of my teachers, Diane Bruni, had told me, oh, this guy is coming to do a workshop, and Linda, you have to do it. And I was like, okay. I'd never seen a picture of him. I don't even know if they had flyers or anything. I really don't think that they had anything. You just, okay, it's this time and this date, and I just showed up. And so I had no idea what to expect. And I show up, and he comes in, and he starts talking about society and how it's programmed us to think that everything we've talked about is what it means to be successful. And I'm sitting in the crowd of people thinking, but that's all I've been doing since I'm 12 years old, is trying to get material success, trying to get recognition, trying to get power, trying to look the right way. I was in the fashion business after all, so I needed to look the right way, right? And so it was really disturbing to me. I really did not like hearing what he said. And honestly, I can't swear, but I thought it was BS, if you know what that means, right? And, so I wasn't open to it at all. But what happened is he planted a seed in my head, because I'd never heard anybody say something so radical before. I was fully on the path of, consumerism. I was on that path. So nobody I knew talked about those kinds of things. If you had a nice house and you were young, and I had a nice house, I was married, I had a car, really nice car, I had a beautiful dog, I was all set up in my, my mid-20s. And I thought that meant something for me, right? And so basically what he was telling me was that was all worth nothing. So it took me some time, but it couldn't leave. And so that little seed just kept growing and growing and growing. And then, of course, as I started practicing and I felt things in my body, it changes your breath, it changes your clarity in your mind. And then I started studying and meditating. So I would do my practice in the morning, my asana practice in the evening. I was being more isolated, being by myself and reading and then meditating on what I read. And I did this for years. So then stuff starts to seep in, and then you start to understand that, you've kind of been set up somehow to think that this is what you need to be happy. So, so going back to society tells us that being financially successful, having a powerful job, that this means that you are a successful person. And also when we look at social media, likes, why does it have to be likes, right? I like you, right? I'm struggling with this, honestly, because as a yoga studio owner, as a yoga teacher, you feel this pressure to be on social media. And I'm not saying, because I've decided to be on social media, right? So I'm not blaming anything else. I take it, I've made the decision, and then it's a practice for me not to look every how come they didn't like this one? Nobody likes my Yoga Sutra posts, this is happening, but I refuse to stop them. I keep doing them, even they get very little attention. But, it's a process, and you can use those as a way to look at yourself instead of judge, what's going on outside. Or for example, asana. So we can come to yoga and say that we're doing yoga, which actually we're never doing yoga. There's no such thing as doing yoga. It's only practicing yoga, or being, right? Being yoga, but you can't do yoga. It's not like cooking a cake or something. So with asana, we can ask ourselves, because who gets the most attention? Who gets the most attention? Like, it's the star yogis, right? And even if, it's the star yogis who have the right body, the right age, and the right physical abilities, right? Those are the people that are getting all the attention. And I'm not saying, because I know a few of them that are amazing people, I'm not saying that they aren't amazing people, but it doesn't necessarily mean I can do good asana equals I am a good yogi, or it doesn't equal I am happy, or any of those things. When I first started teaching yoga, people would come up, when they heard I was teaching yoga, they said, "Oh, you must be so relaxed." I'm like, why do you think I'm doing yoga, right? If I was so relaxed, why would I bother all that time doing yoga, right? I wouldn't need to do it. So, so the greatest yogi doesn't necessarily mean the person who can do the most amazing poses. And really out there in the world, the most people doing yoga are not doing the most amazing poses. It's just the average person who goes to do their job in the day, does their yoga in the evening or on the weekends or in the morning, and does whatever job they're doing, whether they're working in, lawyers and accountants and doctors and media and politics. It's not the person who can hold their breath longest. It's not the person who has the most followers. And then I want to say that there is absolutely nothing wrong with any of those. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with having a powerful job. There's nothing wrong with having, 3 million followers or whatever it is. I'm on a road. This is my project to get lots of subscribers on my YouTube channel. I never get a million, but anyways, it's still my project. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But what creates the problem is if you attach your self-worth to that. Okay, so I can do that pose, so I'll use another example, like hips. So I came to Ashtanga yoga with open hips. And I am still so proud of it. I'm so happy that I can have open hips. But I didn't even have to work for it. It was just there. So why should I be proud of that? It's not something that I had to, build up step by step by step, right? So I can tell myself that it doesn't make me more special. If my hips were stiff, would it make me less special, right? And if, so if I attach my self-worth to that, then the day my hips are not so flexible, then what happens? Then I'm no longer a good yoga teacher. I'm no longer a good yogi, right? So we don't want to attach our self-worth to any of those things. Same with if I cannot do something. So I can't do a handstand in the middle of the room, free handstand and hold for 5 minutes. So I can't do that. Now, if I attach my self-worth to that, then that makes me a bad yogi, a bad yoga teacher. I'm not worthy of calling myself a yoga teacher. Right? So I'm using 2 examples of asana, and this is as a yoga teacher, but even as a yoga, if you're not teaching, just as a yoga practitioner, you can always attach yourself to, I'm flexible, I'm not flexible, right? I'm strong, I am not strong. And so I'm wealthy, I'm not wealthy. So even attaching yourself to the fact that you are not wealthy is still attaching your self-worth to something that doesn't really matter deep inside. Okay, so looking at my notes here. Because deep inside, even with everything or without everything, we will know inside if we truly value ourselves. So if you have everything, let's say you've got an amazing job, you're beautiful, you're young, blah, 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 you have all this. But if deep inside you know that you still don't love yourself, there's always going to be this little thing nagging at you, this unsatisfactoriness, right? In Buddhism, it's itching at you, right? And so then you will never be satisfied. Somehow maybe you'll come to some deeper practices, or you might just need to make more money, or, do more asanas, or whatever it may be. So how do we deal with things like this? So the way we try to deal with this, the way we try to deal with it now is by comparing, right? We compare ourselves to others, and if we see that we're doing better than so-and-so, then this makes us feel a little bit stronger self-worth. If we're doing less good than so-and-so, then this deflates our self-worth. And so it's always going to be changing, because no matter how much money you have, there's always going to be somebody who has more and somebody who has less. How great at asanas you are, there's always going to be somebody who comes along that's better at this or better in general, and there's always going to be somebody who's not as good. So you're never going to be able to solve that equation, right? Does that make sense? Kind of, yeah? Okay. So it kind of just blows up in our face, this way of dealing with it by comparing with each other. So the other way I think a lot of us try to deal with it is by positive aphorisms. And I know this sounds controversial, but I don't know, this whole positive aphorism thing, I think you can only do it if you really feel it. Like if you just scroll with your thumb, right? You get the sore Instagram thumb. If you're just scrolling through positive aphorisms, they don't touch you deeply. So when I go back to those years, my first few years of starting yoga, and when I decided that I needed to understand yoga not only from a physical place, but I wanted to understand the philosophy behind it. And so I started finding books to read and study by myself. I did study with some other teachers, but a lot of it was by myself. And what I would do is I would only read like a paragraph like this, just a little bit. I didn't read, and I still don't. I don't read spiritual books like I would read a novel. A novel you can whip through. But spiritual books, they need to touch you. They need to touch you deep inside. And everybody knows that if you read a full page of something and you try to recall what you read at the beginning of the page, it's gone, right? So what I did is I would read the small bit, and then I would sit and I would go inside, and I would do this just before going to bed and try to feel it. What does that mean? What does that mean? Not just intellectually, not just the words, but what does it mean in my life? How can I embody that? And then I would go to sleep, and it's like magic. I would wake up in the morning, and it was like those words had melted inside me, and they would be kind of on my mind all day long, not in an obsessive way, but just kind of there for the whole day. And then next evening, in the evening, I would pick another paragraph. So it always has taken me really very long times to read spiritual books, because like a year per book, right? So that when I finish, I don't necessarily, I can't quote the book, but I feel like I've absorbed the book, right? So, and then it's very hard to find where your teaching is because you feel like you've absorbed from so many different places. So these positive aphorisms, I think that they can blow up in our face as well because we're not actually embodying them. So I would take one, and another thing I did for a long time is I would write in my day timer one positive aphorism per day. So on Sunday evenings, I would write through the whole week. And then that day, I would get to my office and look at my day timer. Okay, this is my focus to the day. And I would have it right in front of me on my desk. And then I would try to act that out in the day rather than it just kind of coming in and going away. So, and then what about these aphorisms of we can do anything, success is possible to any of us? I think this is a way to divide, right? Because then we can look at some as successful, some as unsuccessful. And I keep using myself as an example because I think I'm just so full of all these things. I'm a great example. But when I told you about when I was successful in the fashion business, I think I was really quite cold-hearted. You know, people wouldn't have described me at the time like that. You know, I didn't look like a cold-hearted person. But when I look back at my thoughts, because I managed to come from nothing, right? My parents were, you know, these teenage parents who, you know, they went bankrupt and they broke up, they went back together. They like, it was just quite a mess, and managed to like really kind of reach this certain amount of success. So I had this idea, if I can do it, anybody can do it. What are you doing sitting on the street asking for money? Look at you, you're 21 years old, you should be up and you should be working. And I think this is a bit of a cold-hearted response to other people's situations, because we can never really know what it's like to be in another human being's body and circumstances. I may have been given certain gifts, and those, all the way I've been molded through my life, have led me to where I am and have given me a certain amount of resilience. Others might not have as much resilience to be able to bounce back from things that bring them down, right? And so it's not so easy if you're telling everybody you can do anything you want. It's just about, you know, finding the right attitude and working hard. It doesn't always work out like that. Some people have the right attitude and work really, really, really hard and never are able to get over certain barriers, right? So you could think about your if you're female or you're male, which country you come from, what color your skin is, you know, all these different kinds, your sexual orientation, all these kinds of things that have some effect on how people are with you on the outside might also be affecting if you can succeed in the way that you want to succeed or not. And so I think it's important to acknowledge those kinds of things, because it's not all within our control. Because if you believe that, then if you succeed, you feel higher than others. If you don't succeed, you feel like a failure, right? And then it'll be how you treat your own self-worth and how you look at the world around you. And we don't want to go there. So a whole lot has to come together to have things work out in a very specific way, right? And not, that is, I don't know, that's just, this is karma, you know, this is what I think it is. I think there's karma that is like there's a natural law of karma, but it's not black and white kind of karma. It's really grayscale karma, and there's your own personal karma. There's your karma that you've been creating in this life. There's karma from previous lives. There's family karma. There's country karma, city karma, national karma, world karma, right? World karma. Sometimes I've been wondering, and I know that I shouldn't say this, especially if I'm going to post this on YouTube, but I'm going to say it anyway. Sometimes you have to wonder about the coronavirus. It's made us isolate. It's taking care of the earth on some level, right? On all the pollution, the travel we've been doing, on some level you're like, is this our world karma? Is this kind of thing happening because we have not been paying attention to how we behave with each other, with that world, right? I don't know, I don't want to make any controversy. So if you watch this and you want to send me hate mail, please don't. But basically we have to acknowledge that things turn out in a way because of very many circumstances that we can't even pinpoint. We don't even know why it's turned out like this. Even our characters and our habits. So what I was saying earlier, like, do your habits and your neuroses and your characters really ever leave you? All of the problems, like you feel like like I said, when I was younger, I felt like this, and I feel like I've progressed, but they have never actually left me. They're always there. They're ready to, as soon as things change one way, the old habit is ready to pounce back, So I think what happens more than that they just leave you is that we learn not to make such a big deal out of them, or not to allow them to make so much damage in our life, right? Does that make sense? So if we have some bad habit, if we bring some consciousness to it, and we try to make it better, that it doesn't actually make it 100% go away. It just makes it like it's somehow being dealt with in a more skillful manner, I would say, right? And then another question I had is, are we using our yoga to propagate the character flaws? Samskaras is actually a better word for it, our samskaras, which is, our samskaras are like our grooves, how we behave. And the more we karma is an action. The more we do an action, it grooves deeper and deeper and deeper, which becomes our samskara. So if I do something, or if I'm generous, like when you first start trying to be generous, it might not feel natural. It doesn't feel authentic. Somebody told you it's good to be generous or express gratitude or something, and it might feel very forced and fake for a while. But then if you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, it starts to become you. And then the more and more and more and more you do it over the years, it just becomes part of your character that you're a generous person, right? Same if you eat unhealthily. So if you keep eating unhealthy for years and years and years, it's going to be harder to get out of that, right? And so even when you're a healthy eater, when you get very depressed, or a tragic thing happens in your life, what happens? You go to the store and you buy a liter of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, right? That's what I do. So what else did I have on my notes? So are we using the yoga really to loosen our samskaras, or are we covering them up? Are we bringing consciousness to them? So if you think about yoga asanas, so if you are wanting to power yourself through the world, right? I can succeed. I can do whatever I need to do to succeed. And you're used to being this kind of powerful person. And then you come to your yoga asanas and you approach it with the same kind of power, right? I can do this asana. I'm going to get it. I'm going to do it until it happens, right? I succeed. I did that asana. You know, you're not really changing your samskaras, right? Does that make sense? I'm not saying not to succeed in yoga asanas, but it's still propagating the mentality of I have succeeded, right? Rather than I am just perfect how I am. I'm going to be conscious, work where I'm at, and if it changes, great. If it doesn't change, great. See what I mean? You're working with effortless effort, like the Yoga Sutras, right? So you don't have to equal your self-worth to, I worked really hard and now I can do that asana. This is what the world is giving us. This is what kids are being fed from, from kindergarten. You work hard and you will succeed and you will be happy. So we don't want that in our yoga asana practice. Okay, not everybody's ready to hear that kind of thing, and this is fine. I wasn't ready to hear that kind of thing at the beginning. I thought it was great that I could do yoga asanas. I was energized by them. I felt like I could jump to the moon, honestly. After my yoga practice, I honestly felt like Wonder Woman, but then after some time, going deeper, and starting to realize, but that doesn't make me any better. Really, still inside, it makes you feel better for a short amount of time. It gives you a bit more clarity, but inside, I'm still me. I still have all those issues, right? So now what do I need to do? I need to learn to deal with those issues. I need to embrace those issues. I need to learn that those issues do not define who I really am. Does that make sense? Whether you're kind, sometimes you're skillful and sometimes you're unskillful. Sometimes you're kind, sometimes you're unkind. Sometimes you're calm and handling the situation well. Sometimes you're screaming like a maniac woman. And if you identify yourself with all that, you're always going to be going up and down. But who you really are deep inside, your self-worth is more than any of that. So and you have the right to be seen. God, I'm going way over time. Do you want me to stop now, or do you, how much time? Okay, because I've got a little more time. I had too much stuff on my list to talk about. So you have the right to be seen, and we all need to learn. One project that I was doing for a while is to look in the mirror and see who I am. And this is hard. I don't know. It was really hard for me because I didn't like the way I looked. And so to look and see all those flaws in myself wasn't easy. But I had to look, especially as you age. I look good on the camera because it's very small and you got the, but in the bright light of day, you see all your little flaws and, and this can be hard. But I think it's really important to see who you are and to see that you don't need to change anything. You don't need to judge anything. You do not need to fix anything. That will never lead to self-worth. It will never ever lead to. It'll only increase the superficial idea of self-worth. So that was one of my practices I wanted to suggest, was seeing your self-worth. And I was going to talk about the Yoga Sutras, but I think either I'll talk about it next week or you can read on your own, because I wanted to equate this idea of seeing with what they say in the Yoga Sutras. So the first Yoga Sutra is basically saying, here I am, I'm going to start explaining what yoga is. And then the second Yoga Sutra explains what yoga is. And yoga is the cessation or the calming of the fluctuations of the mind, the whirlings, right? This is constantly going on, the whirlings, to calm those. And what happens when you manage to do this? So this is the sutra I wanted to talk about. So if you want to make in your notes, it's Sutra 1-3. And it's then the seer, the self, abides in his own nature, or her own nature. Let's put it her. It's all girls there anyway. So this is the seer. This is what is going to give us all a real sense of deep self-worth, because I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here like everybody else deserves to be here. Not more or less than anybody else, but exactly the same that everybody else deserves to be here. And yoga is going to help us have the seer, the self, abide in its own nature. And then this is going to have us feel that authentic self. And when we go around the world feeling like the authentic self, then I believe we have more chance of being kind and compassionate and being skillful. You know, until you're fully enlightenment, you're still going to have the down periods, but accepting those down periods for what they are. It's okay to feel down. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel fearful. It's okay to be mean sometimes. We're just, you know, we're self-centered, we're selfish, and if we try to hide it, then it's like an evil enemy. But if you recognize it, wow, that was really selfish of me. Oh, that was really mean of me. Oh God, okay, I'm gonna do better next time, because I can't change it, right? I can apologize, but I cannot change it. So now I just need to accept it and do better next time. And if you're over harsh with yourself, you do not do better next time. Doesn't work, right? You only do better next time when you're compassionate with yourself. And then the Sutra 1-4. So at other times, the self appears to assume the forms of the mental modifications. So it's summing up everything that I've talked about, right? So the self is going to assume that it's worth something because of the thoughts in the mind. The thoughts in the mind are telling you you only have self-worth if whatever, you have a high education, you finish second series, whatever because it's all personal, right? Whatever, it would be an interesting project to write it down. What do you identify with being successful? And then really see it, look at it, right? I gave my challenge to myself some years ago because I'm a busy person. And I love being busy and everything and having projects, but then there's a certain amount of feeling like because I'm so busy, this makes my things be important. But then I made my challenge to myself. Instead of challenging myself to be busy, I challenged myself to have more free time. Right? To have nothing to do, to just have to lie there and get bored and then think, about whatever. Because when you get bored, this is when your creativity shows up. When you get bored is when you understand a little bit about what the sutras mean, right? When you read these scriptures from a very calculated mind, you don't understand. You understand the words, but you don't really understand what they mean. But if you get bored and just kind of zone out in them and try to understand it from that place of, zoning out with them in the back of your mind, then you start to understand what they actually mean, right? So let's do the quick meditation, and I think this will I think it sums up the whole talk. So come and sit back in a position where the spine can be elongated and tall. Closing the eyes. Just keeping the eyes closed. I'm going to explain to you sometimes how the seer is explained with this analogy of a lake. So our mind is the lake. So bring yourself inside. And imagine in your skull where you feel your thoughts. So it's usually the front half, upper part of the brain where you can feel the thoughts, the energy of the thoughts percolating. And in this area, imagine that area as a lake. So just any normal lake. And notice that there's a lot of sand or particles in that lake. And all these particles, they make the lake kind of foggy. So you can't see the bottom of the lake. It looks kind of dark. And there's no real reflection from the lake either. The darker the lake is, the heavier and the darker our thoughts feel. And if there's a lot of action in that lake, like there's a storm or a tide moving the water all over the place, then it feels like the thoughts are just swirling around, moving in all kinds of direction, unable to focus, unable to settle. So sometimes our minds can feel this way. And now imagine that the lake starts to calm, and as it's calming, all that sediment is slowly coming down to the bottom of the lake. It's just clearing away. It's almost like the sediment is disappearing. So the lake is looking clearer and clearer. You start to notice, rather than that dark color, it starts to look more blue. Slowly, the thoughts start to settle more and more, just like the sediment of the lake. And the mind starts to feel clearer. So imagining in the skull now You have this nice crystal blue water that's just very still, very calm. And notice when it's so calm like this, you have this sensation like you're able to go to the depths of the mind. Not the thought mind, but the subtle mind, the intuitive mind. So that you know that you're there. But the body and the mind start to feel more still. The breath becomes more quiet. And now imagine the top of that lake. There's this bright, brilliant blue sky. Blue, the clouds, the sun are all clearly reflected in the lake. So that all at once you have this sensation of the subtle mind, but with complete attentiveness and clarity. Maintaining that sense of subtleness and clarity in the mind, you can start to feel the connection to the heart center. So the heart starts to feel wide open. Feels open to embrace yourself, all parts of you, your deep, authentic, true self, soul, divine, the divine within you. Because really, it's magical. It's truly magical. This life, how we exist, how we're able to move around and think, communicate, share, and just be. Trying to embrace yourself for all that you are. absolutely enough. It's all there. It's always there. You bring yourself home, home to the heart. You know that you are always enough. Bring the palms to the heart center. You can send peace and happiness out everywhere. The peace you feel in your own heart. And hope that you can send it so that anybody else who needs this can feel it. You can rub the hands together. Bring the hands over the eyes. And opening the eyes behind the hands. Namaste. Thank you. Is that helpful? Does it make some sense? Oh, good. Good, I'm glad. Okay. You're welcome. Thank you for sharing with me. Okay, so I see you maybe next week. And share this. I'm going to put it on the YouTube channel, so don't hesitate to share it to others. I think, these talks, sometimes it's, it's hard to hear, but I think it's kind of interesting at the same time. So, share. Yeah. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have a good evening. I will.